Hello everyone. If you've ever been in an internet dispute on any political subject, you might have heard the argument, you might have heard someone say in an argument that the Soviet Russia killed more people than the Nazis did, or they killed more of their own people than the Nazis did in the Holocaust. Now, if you believe that Hitler and the Nazis are solely responsible for starting World War II, which is a very popular belief, and you added together all of the deaths in World War II and on both sides, including the huge number of deaths in Operation Barbarossa, I think all of those deaths are probably more than the deaths under Soviet rule in Russia. But assuming that the argument that Soviets killed more of their people than Nazis did of theirs, taking that to be just what it is on the surface, just that, what does that mean as an argument? Now, when I started thinking about this when I was listening to a podcast called Harmon, which is a podcast where Dan Harmon, who you might know is the creator of Rick and Morty and Community, he just talks to his friends and sometimes plays Dungeons and Dragons. I think it's funny, but Dan Harmon occasionally goes on political rants, and he rants in a fairly funny way, so it's usually for comedic effect, just to have something to talk about. He talks about these arguments he gets in on Twitter, but for the last about 6 months, I mean probably since the Charlottesville rally, he's been much more serious in his sort of soapboxing, talking about political issues. Well, from what he says on Harmontown, it seems that he is actually afraid of the white supremacist movement in America, what he calls Nazis and fascism. He calls Trump a fascist and a Nazi, and I don't quite agree with him on that terminology, but the point is that what he says is that he was on Twitter and he quit Twitter recently because he saw someone say that Soviets killed more people than Nazis did. And when he said that, his other friends on the podcast and the audience all made this like sound. They all went, oh, you know, like, how could you ever say that? Like, that's disgusting. They made like this disgusted, dismissive sound, and that really surprised me. When I heard that, in the like Mr. Spock robot part of my brain, I'm just thinking, well, that is a scientific, factual, historic truth. I didn't really have much of a reaction to that at all, but what I realised when I listened to that is that when I listened to that noise that they all made, and they, you know, in agreement that yes, that is a terrible thing to say, I realised that what they heard was not the Soviets killed more people than Nazis ever did. They heard it wouldn't be so bad if the Nazis were back, or, you know, maybe Nazi rule wasn't so bad. That's what they thought that person was saying, and to an extent that is kind of what they were saying. But I think maybe you've even been that person. I mean, looking at my comment section, it seems like a lot of people who comment on my videos might be the kind of person who'd say that, and I wouldn't have judged them for saying that because it's just stating a historical fact, in my opinion. But I think what that person, and what you, if you've ever said that, maybe you could tell me what you meant, but what I kind of thought they were meant was, maybe you shouldn't be trying to make America more like Soviet Russia. I think the people who are saying that, and a lot of people who are having arguments on the internet about politics and, you know, the right versus the left, and this sort of political polarization that's been happening recently, the people who are now being clustered with the right and the far right, and also libertarians who are now being clustered with those people, unfairly I think, but those people who are saying, hey, the Soviets were worse than the Nazis in this one respect, they're saying they're actually afraid that America is becoming more like Soviet Russia. They're less afraid of the Nazis and fascism, not like Dan Harmon, who's afraid of the Nazis and fascism in that sense. these people who say Soviets killed more people than Nazis are afraid that America's and the West is going towards Soviet Russia. So you've got these two sets of people. Well, obviously there are lots of people in between and on the outside, but I kind of had this realization that it's kind of like people like James Damore wearing his Gulag shirt, the one that's in the Google font spelled Goolag. Maybe you've seen it. He wore that Gulag shirt because he was trying to make a parallel between him getting fired from Google and this sort of thought police idea, and freedom of speech being restricted. He was comparing that to Soviet Russia. Obviously, it's not as bad as Soviet Russia because he only got fired. He didn't get executed or sent to a work camp or a Gulag. He only got fired, which is still pretty bad. But people like him and the other people, and me to an extent, we're worried about the West becoming fascist in the other direction. I read some of the book Liberal Fascism by Jonah Goldberg. I haven't finished reading it. I just kind of stopped. I can't remember why. I probably need to read another book. But this idea that people are using this word fascism a lot. Mostly it's people who are anti-Trump and the people on the left who call the right fascists. People have called James Damore fascist for writing his memo. It's used an awful lot. It's overused in my opinion. But in Liberal Fascism, the book, Jonah Goldberg makes this argument that fascism is not just this word that means racism, or it's sort of this thought police idea. He was saying that the left are the ones who are displaying this fascist behavior. I won't go too much into that because that's not what this video is about. But my point is that I think the people on the other side, the people on the right side of the argument, I mean politically right, not correct. The right side of the argument are saying they're afraid of left-wing fascism, and they're afraid of Soviet Russia and communism coming to their country. And the people on the left side are afraid of the same thing, but from the right, from the Nazis, as they call them. That's why they're calling everyone Nazis, because that's what we're afraid of. They're trying to tell you, by calling everyone a Nazi and calling you a Nazi, perhaps, calling me a Nazi, calling James Damore a fascist, and I'm sure someone's called him a Nazi, although I haven't seen anyone specifically say that. They're saying, I'm afraid that Nazi Germany is going to come back in America or in whatever country they're from. And I think that's pretty interesting. And what I think is important, what Dan Harmon's reaction to that Twitter post, Twitter comment, says to me is that we're not speaking the same language. When you have an argument with someone online who's from, the further they get from your political point on the political compass, the more they actually don't understand what you're saying, which is why it's so important to make a nuanced and charitable argument. I mean, maybe you've seen, I don't have that many trolls in my comment sections. Most of them are, obviously everyone is overwhelmingly very positive and polite, which I like, but when someone gets a little into the kind of mean region, a little bit not nice about me and my videos, they frequently what I do is just to assume the best in them, or not assume it, but just pretend I'm assuming the best in them, and sort of writing a comment like, oh, that's interesting that you think that way, I'm sorry you don't like my video, or something like that. And then it's amazing how much they brighten up and they go like, oh, look, it's, they're so, it seems like they're so pleased that I responded to them, and then go like, oh no, I didn't really mean it. Like, it's really funny. And I think that's what the internet is missing more of, is just giving people the benefit of the doubt, just reading what someone else says in the most charitable way that you possibly could, not assuming that they're a Nazi, not assuming that they're a communist. Just take their comment, take what they say on the best way that you could. I mean, who am I to say, give you advice really, but that's what I do, and I think it's actually what would help, maybe. I'd like to see more of it, at least. Who knows if it would actually make a difference, but once again, if you have anything to say about all of this, if you think that Nazis are amazing, or if you think communism is great, please leave a comment and I'll try to get back to you. Thanks for watching.